Well, we're here. We are at the end of one year, the beginning of another year, and an opportunity for real possibilities is upon us. We now have the opportunity to look forward to new adventures, wrap up past moments, and make sure that we go into the next year with a plan of action that aligns our time with our priorities. And all of that sounds great, but in order to make that actually possible, we need to take some time to create what you'll call an annual plan. If you were like me, hearing that word annual plan, you're probably feeling something like this. And if that's you, no sweat, because that's also where I was at a few years ago. But my hope is that by the end of this video, you hear the word annual plan and you think, now, how are we going to bridge those realities? Well, we're going to roll up our sleeves, or pull up our sleeves in my case, and we're going to talk through a practical step-by-step approach to how to do annual planning, what it involves, what it doesn't involve. I'm creating this video not as some kind of expert in annual planning, although it's the internet. I'm sure somebody out there is claiming to be the expert in annual planning, but for me, that's not the case. I just want to share what's working for me and kind of create the video I wish I had seen 4 years ago when I was really struggling with this whole concept of annual planning and wasting a whole lot of time because of it. So to start us off, I want to talk about what annual planning is not, because this is the mistake I made when I first started getting into this. I just had the wrong mindset. Annual planning is not what you see on the screen here. This is what I was doing for the first few years of business ownership. I thought annual planning was simply planning. I thought it was the act of deciding what you want very quickly as you can, and then spending all of your time making sure you had a way to get that result. So, for example, if you thought, I want to make $2 million a year. Awesome. That effectively was most of the work you needed to do on the thinking side. You need to come up with some kind of big audacious goal, write it down, make sure it's measurable, and then you're good on thinking. Time to move on to the next phase. And that next phase usually resulted in taking your big goal of $2 million in revenue, let's say, and breaking that down into quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily activities and mini goals. Each of the things you broke your overall goal down into became this kind of measuring stick for whether or not you were doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And you would spend all of your planning time just making sure you had all of the different check boxes so you could remind yourself to check off those boxes down the line. This New Year's resolution approach to tracking my goals just did not work for me, because what I ended up doing is I would rush through deciding what to do, because I'd be like, all right, here's my vision, $2 million in revenue, sure, let's do it. And then I would just focus all of my time, the vast majority of my time, on how am I going to do it, trying to predict every possibility, every action, every focus, every project. And I would spend so much time planning that it would essentially be, procrastinating planning. There was no way I was going to be able to ever predict all of the actions I needed to do quarterly, monthly, daily to make that possible, despite that being the prevailing wisdom at the time. As a result, I would spend so much time planning things that didn't actually matter to me, and 2 months into doing that annual plan, I'd scrap it. I just look at it and say, I don't care about these goals. I don't want to feel like shit every time I don't hit some kind of arbitrary revenue goal that didn't even matter to me to begin with, and then just lose all steam that I don't want to go on with the business. It was just so discouraging and just arbitrary that I just kind of scrapped it. And there was a year where I did no planning at all. I was like, I'm done with this. And then I kind of reinvented it a little bit, which is what I want to talk about here. So I need to shake things up. This just was not going to work for me. It might work for others. If it works for you, I'm so happy for you. You will not like the rest of this video because this to me was poop. It did not work. Instead, this is how I do annual planning. It's broken down into 4 different parts, usually spread out over a couple days. And each part you'll see is weighted very differently than the New Year's resolution style of planning, which I was practicing for years. For the rest of this video, I want to just take this and I'm going to walk you through every step as if you were just following along with me as I was creating my annual plan for the next year. The first part of my journey is the thinking part. And this is, I said about 50%, which I think is a fair estimate. 50% of my overall annual planning is just thinking. And for some of you, this may feel insane because you're used to the bullet journal template where all of your time is spent building out all of your beautiful charts. But to me, as I talked about previously, that kind of approach resulted in me often spending my time on things that I didn't care about. I need to really think about what I want truly, and not just go with the first thing that pops into my head. Because when I skipped this thinking part and I only made it 10% like I did in the original, annual planning up here, I ended up spending a lot of time on things I ultimately did not care about, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of planning. So I flipped it. I spent about 50% of my time on thinking, and that falls into 4 major categories. I'm going to break these down, so if you want to steal them, feel free. But before I do, I'll give a quick disclaimer that today I'm focused on examples from the company side of things. So like many of you, I wear multiple hats. I have a life, sort of. I have side projects and side creative endeavors, and I have a company. And I'm just going to focus my examples today on the company side of things, but everything I'm talking about can apply to personal life, to side projects, to hobbies, anything. It's the same concept. So with that aside, the first area is vision and mission. This is where I always start because this is kind of the biggest zoom out that I can do for the given area I'm looking to plan for. Usually I'll do this at the very start of my planning day as a way to kind of get my head on straight as to where I'm heading. If you haven't already established some kind of vision or mission either for your life or for your business, doing that here would be a great way to start your planning. Now, I already have a routine in my life to review the vision, mission, and values of my company, in this case, every 3 months to kind of fine-tune things. But I like to have this as the kickoff to my planning day because I think it really gets my head on straight and allows me to start thinking about where exactly the company overall is going beyond the 1-year horizon. So the first stop on my annual planning would be here. I'd be re-reviewing all of this information, make sure that things make sense to me, they still resonate, they're still compelling, and that I can really clearly understand where we're heading. And here's my shorthand. You can see I have it explained to the team because this is shared with my company. This is where we're going. Get ready, world. That's essentially what vision is. Where's the destination? When will you be able to pat yourself on the back and say, you know what, this company's done what it needs to do. We can just relax now. For example, right now, the vision of ProcessDriven, my company, is to turn the idea of systemizing your business, which is kind of this vague marketing term that means nothing, into a quantifiable game. So there's set rules to it. And better still, a game where lean teams of less than 50 people can win at that game. So we've got 2 major challenges that we need to solve as a company. First, the quantification of systemizing your business, which I think a lot of marketers will be resentful once that's actually quantified. And then on the other hand, we need to somehow make that game that we've added rules to and made clear and quantified a game that any lean team can reasonably win. So it's not just the game of big corporations or Amazons who are able to benefit from this. So reviewing the vision and mission and then making it tangible, that's always my first stop, and often a place where I'll spend probably like an hour or 2 at the very beginning of an annual planning day because I like to touch base on the really big vision, in addition to what I do each quarter, but I just want to go deeper. After that, I want to focus on the journey. So I view 1 year as a journey from A to Z, from beginning of the year to end of the year. And so my focus is on understanding those 2 points. If I can understand where I'm at and where I need to get, I can always get there. It's like a GPS coordinate. If I know where I'm starting and where I'm ending, directions are no problem. But figuring out those points in business can be a challenge, or for any annual plan. And so that's where the rest of my time is spent. When it comes to reviewing the status quo, or point A, I'll focus first on identifying what hurts. That's usually the biggest thing I use for figuring out where I want to focus my time over a coming year. This is something that isn't my own personal prioritization that may not work for everybody, but I know I'm someone that's pretty good at analyzing the situation I'm in, and I'm not easily skewed by the emotions of a momentary shift. And so for me, if something's hurting in the business or something's bothering me, that's usually a sign that there's a systemic issue there, and I can trust that gut to tell me to focus in on that area. Now, if my gut isn't very decisive on what hurts most in the business, which some seasons it's not, everything feels fine or equally bad or equally good, exercises I might use to help with this would do something like a SWOT analysis or reviewing expenses. And by that, I mean where our time is going, where our energy is going, and where our money is going. Usually that will help me figure out what hurts if I don't already intuitively know it. Next up, I've got 3 different versions of essentially get all the information I can. I'm in my business. I'm an owner-operator. I'm not just, an owner with somebody else running my business. I know what happens on a day-to-day basis pretty well because we're a lean team. My eyes and ears are everywhere. But doesn't mean I remember everything. So before I make any kind of plan, I want a wide net of information reaching me so I can make a good decision as to where I want us to focus. That might involve reviewing financial data, time tracking data, other information back like we did over here. That might also include reviewing our ideas list, which is a concept I talk more about in this video, but essentially it's just a list we have inside our company where anyone can add any ideas. Whether they think of the ideas, like they want to have a new time off benefit that just came in recently, or maybe they heard an idea. Like for example, maybe a client told us they want to have a program for how to delegate your email inbox, which also just happened. That idea can then go on this ideas list. This ideas list builds up over the year and it's worked through pretty regularly, but I rarely take the time to read through every single thing except during annual planning. So those are my two major data sources. The last one is journals. I don't keep a personal journal. I wish I did. I'm sure it'd be great. But instead, I do a public journal. And if you haven't checked it out, it's actually right here on YouTube. Every quarter I go live and I share the ins and outs of my business. What's working, what's not working. A lot of the numbers I'll just share transparently. And it's an opportunity for me to kind of share more with the audience to demonstrate the transparency I'd like to see more of. But selfishly, it's also super useful for me when it comes to annual planning because I can then rewatch or listen to those quarterly reviews from myself and use those to piece together some of the key events of the year I may have forgotten, to see how I was feeling in each quarter, and to kind of capture some of the data I might have not written out in some of these other areas. Oh, and I should say, if you want to see these embarrassing journal entries, because they're public, I mean, you're welcome to, you can actually find them in the info card that we'll have above this video, or if that button moves away too fast, which I know sometimes it does. Ouch. You can also just go to my channel, search the word look back, one word, and you'll be able to find these videos in one big old playlist. And you can watch all of them and see all of my dirty laundry and all of the mistakes I've made since we started doing these. And I would love to see you there. So check that out. And actually, by the time you're watching this, I'm pretty sure I'll have a look back coming up in just a few weeks. So if you're into it, come to the next live one coming up right around the corner. So back to together, that's how I review point A. From there, I want to focus on point Z, or as the rest of you might call point Z. For point Z here, we're trying to focus on where our destination is going to be at the end of the planning period. For this case, it's annual, so it'd be the end of the year. The question I find really helpful for this particular piece when I think about where I want to end up is, what competency would I like to have that I may or may not already have, either personally or as a company? For me, this competency question is a lot more powerful than what do I want to accomplish or how much money do I make? Because to me, competency captures so much. It captures having people on the team, skills on the team, experience, practice, processes, all of the stuff that makes the business hum can be really captured with competency. And so that's a question I use to kind of guide where I want to end up. For example, I know that one of the goals I have for this current year was to build up a competency with short form video. Not, mastery, but at least basic competency. And maybe in future years, we'll be building on that or pivoting to something else. To me, competency captures who and how, which are the two important ingredients on the business side. And as with the mission and vision side, my goal is always to make it vivid. I want to be able to see, smell, taste, put myself into the future and really feel what that's like. Now, the last thing I have here is called reviewing scale. And this is kind of a gut check that will probably be circular for me and maybe for you when you go through annual planning. For me, this is asking 3 questions to kind of check on all of the stuff I've just either decided or established, okay? These 3 checks are big, proud, and inspired. Now, I'll start off with defining big. Big is something I've actually stolen from Cody Sanchez. She's a YouTuber, and she said this line in a YouTube video that really resonated. So I've incorporated it into my own annual planning, where she asks, what could you do now that would make your 6-year plan more of a 6-month plan? Essentially asking you to challenge yourself to find things with disproportionate return. Little things that make a big difference. So big is my first check. Am I playing it big, or am I just, fiddling around with little things that don't make a huge impact? Now, the second thing on here is proud. And I also call this the grandma check. I've started using this more and more with the team, but essentially I want to make sure everything we're creating, when we're done with it, we're so excited and proud of what we've done that we want to take a picture of it and send it to our grandma. Yeah, grandma might not understand what we did, might have no frame of reference, but we are so proud of ourselves that we want to share it. We have to share it, even with people who may not understand what it is. And to me, that's become a bigger and bigger piece of prioritization. It helps us on the big front, but it also helps us as a gut check to make sure we're excited about what we are scoping out as our destination. And, not just doing things because we should do them or because they might make more money, because that's not a strong enough motivator to really last. The third thing is inspiring. This ties into proud, but it's a little bit more day to day. Essentially, I want to see is whatever my plan is, would I be so excited about this that I would lose track of time while working my way towards it, either personally or collectively as a company? There might be something big I could do in my business that would have an outsized return, and it would be so impressive I'd want to tell grandma about it. But when it comes to actually doing that day in and day out, I would lose my mind. And to me, that would be a failure of this flow check. And if that happened, I would go back to those earlier steps and revisit some of the A and Z. I know this was a lot of information, but all of this here is just what I consider part one of annual planning, and it's just thinking. I usually spend a whole day with just my whiteboard here, sometimes multiple days, and I'll just spread it out. And I'll just keep coming back to this question of where are we? What is our bottleneck? What isn't our bottleneck? What do I want our core competencies to be? Is that the core competency that's the most important? Does that really matter to me? Would that inspire me? Would that inspire us? Would that further our mission? These questions would be what I'd be asking and re-asking myself. Please note, I'm doing this by myself, and that's what the examples I'm providing here, because I'm a one-person owner. When it comes to this stuff, I'm usually bouncing around and arguing with myself, so this works for me, but pulling in somebody else here may be a really great way to get more value out of this. Now, once we get the thinking down, we are ready to do a little bit of goal setting. Nothing crazy like New Year's resolution stuff, but a little bit, because it does help us anchor our vision to reality to have some kind of benchmark as to whether our stuff is working. For me, goals fall into two categories. First, big numbers. Second, role metrics. Big numbers are referring to things like profit, dollars in the savings account, revenue, and expenses. Those are really my four major areas that I pay attention to. For better or worse, I think about big numbers in this order of priority. My number one is looking at savings. I want to always have 3 months of savings in the bank. My ideal is 6 months because I'm conservative and I just like to be ready for anything. Beyond just having those operating expenses sitting in the bank and hopefully invested in something else, I then worry about expenses because expenses are the only part of the financial puzzle that we can fully control. What expenses do we have? What expenses do we want to have? Which is a little bit of a shift. This year, for example, I really wanted to make sure that I was redundant, that I had full coverage for every process in the business. And so that way, if I wanted to take a 2-week vacation, nothing would stop, nothing would change. And that came with an increase in expenses. I wanted to spend more on labor, and that informed my plan for this particular year. After expenses, it's profit. I want to decide what amount of profit do I want and how do I want to spend that profit. For example, some years it might be I want to max out profit and I want to withdraw all of it from the company because the company's doing good. They don't need it, but I've got stuff on the personal side that I'm investing in that I need that profit for. Most of the time though, in fact, all of the time in my history here, it's the opposite, where I want to plan profit so that way I'm reinvesting in the company in future years or building up that savings account. Deciding whether to give up profit to have short-term expenses or to save profit into savings is kind of a whole other video that someone else much smarter than me can probably make, but those are my first 3 numbers. From there, revenue is something I only look at as a byproduct, which is very different than the New Year's resolution style of everything being about revenue. I don't care about revenue. It's like the least important number. Yeah, you have $5 million in revenue, but you only keep 100,000 of it. No thanks. Like that's not that exciting to me. So for me, I look at revenue as the reverse engineering of these other numbers. For example, if I want to have $500,000 in salaries in the company because I want an in-house team of so many people, and I want to make sure my labor costs are 25%, let's say, of the company overall revenue, because that's a good benchmark for my industry, I might say, okay, I want to have $2 million in revenue to make sure that that math all works. In that way, revenue is just a byproduct of everything else, but it is still considered a big number. Oh, and I should say, if as I'm going through this, anything in here resonates with you, maybe you have your own tips or your own strategies when it comes to annual planning, I would love to hear it. I am by no means some kind of expert, but I do really love processes. I love to see how people do things. I think the how contains so much magic. So if you found something that works for you, or if something I'm doing on here, you're like, oh, that didn't work because of this, I really want to hear it. Just drop me a comment below. I read all of them and it would be great to kind of swap notes. Anyway, back to beyond the big numbers, I have role metrics. And if I expand this is essentially me trying to break down these big numbers into bite-sized chunks that are appropriate for the people I have on my team. From there, I'm doing more reverse engineering. I've reversed engineered revenue. So let's just say $2 million a year is what I need to have the expenses that I want. And from there, I need to figure out what does that mean in terms of smaller metrics. So for example, if I have somebody who's responsible for getting people to our sales page, how many people does that have to be to make $2 million in revenue? doing that math based on our conversion rates, for example, let's just say 1% of people buy, do that math backwards, that's going to determine the smaller goals I break down for the team. In a perfect world, the team wouldn't need these smaller goalposts because they could just look at 2 million in revenue and target towards that. But I think what we've all sometimes struggled with is how big numbers can feel and how out of our control they are. So by breaking them down into the smaller leading indicators, I've had more success both for myself and also for the team in making goals bite-size. And so those are kind of my next steps. And this usually is quite a quick process. This whole goals piece is usually done in about 2 hours, I would say, of annual planning. And I say 2 hours just because I'm a little bit slow at math. It's not a particularly intense section. It's just breaking down numbers and doing some calculations. It's nothing crazy, but it does, I think, help as you get into the later stages. Next up, we get to part 3. By this point, I have where we are and where I want to be, and I have some goals to kind of measure our progress along that trajectory. And in part 3, I just want to start communicating this because for me, my ideas become stronger the more they're debated, which is sometimes problematic for the team who aren't as comfortable with debating. But truly, I want people to disagree and poke holes, and I would expect the same if they asked me for feedback. So that's kind of what the communication phase is. So the first part of this is kind of defining and refining the vision. The way I'm going to do that is sharing usually a video, because that's how I think through things, where I'll talk through what my thoughts are, my point A to point Z, and give a talk through. I'll send that video to the leadership team at the company, to maybe my mastermind, to a trusted friend, to a business advisor, and I'll say, here's what I'm thinking. And my goal is that every single one of those people tell me why it's a terrible idea, or what doesn't make sense, or what's confusing, or what they would have done instead, to just kind of poke holes and refine. From there, I have a quarterly call with the leadership team of the company. And I'm using all these terms, but like we're a small company, ranging from 8 to 15 at any moment of time, we're small. And so this is 2 people on the team who I get together on a Zoom call with me virtually for a whole day, and we just work through how we're going to get to that vision, really refining the journey from A to Z. My job as CEO is to define A and to define Z. Anything in between there that I can refine for people is nice, but not my job. I really believe it's the job of the leadership team to bridge that gap more fully. Overall, this process, this quarterly planning, is the handoff for me where I delegate the ownership of realizing the vision to the leadership team in this case. But if you're someone who's just a team of 1, do not let this freak you out. For a lot of the time, I was just delegating it to my future self. And that also counts. You're just switching gears between planning mode and doing mode. But if you have other people, then you can truly hand it off to them. Wherever you're at right now is perfectly fine. There is no reason to have a bigger team just for whatever. But mentally, you want to realize you're making a shift now. No longer time to start throwing crazy ideas at the wall. Once you get into this point, you need to start locking it in. After we refine the vision, the next phase is selling the vision. And this is where you just communicate with any stakeholders you have. For me, it's a small team. For you, it might be yourself or your spouse or your virtual assistant or your entire corporation, whoever it is. You just need to sell them on why your vision is worth going to. Because, humans, there's so much we can do. We could just shut down this whole business and go live on a beach somewhere and sell lobsters. I mean, we could. It might not work out so well. There's just so many possibilities for all of us, and we only have one life, YOLO as they say. Getting somebody to believe in your vision and want to make it a reality because they see how exciting it is, they pass those 3 checks of having it be big, inspiring, and grandma-worthy. That is a job in and of itself. So selling the vision is the next step. Sometimes if the vision is really hard to sell, meaning it's hard to get people to believe in it, it may be a prompt to go refine that vision some more. But ideally, if you've done the other steps properly, whoever you're selling to, whether it's yourself a week later or these other people, it'll be easier to do. But overall, that's the communication piece. Again, a few hours in the process, nothing crazy, focusing on asking, listening, and eventually selling to other human beings to see how your ideas exist in the wild. Do they thrive or do they die? Once we get through part 3, though, we are on to part 4, and this is the planning. Now, I have this at about 30%. I like to think about this as about a half day, maybe a full day of work. Planning involves a lot of little steps, but really just 2 categories. 1, we want to define our existing commitments. And 2, we want to define our new commitments. Here at ProcessDriven, we call them growth projects. To start off with the easy one, which is existing commitments, I'm usually looking at things like this. First up, company promises. Is there anything that we promise to do or make time for or prioritize that we need to do because we promised. One of those might be, having holidays for the company or having the company be closed for certain days. That is a promise. Other things like an offer we promised to launch or a wait list that we've been, saying we're going to create something for. That's all a promise. Beyond that, we might have things like repeatable wins, essentially things that we've done before that we really want to do again, and so they deserve a space on our calendar moving forward. This might be things like seasonal sales campaigns, routines that we found that were really effective, or a team retreat that we do every year that we want to treat as sacred. Anything we want to carry with us from the previous year would count as a commitment here. Finally, even though we're focusing on the company side today, life promises figure in here too. I will usually plan my personal vacations at the same time as I plan the company overall annual plan because I want to make sure I'm not heading out on vacation before a giant sales campaign and vice versa. Something I don't currently do, but I would love to do in the future is making sure that we also get life promises from the team factored in here. Right now, we have a lot of our team who submit their time off a year in advance, which is amazing, but not everybody. And I think it would be so cool if we could get all of the team members to submit all of their time off for the next year in advance for as much as possible. So we can plan our, for example, a team retreat around everybody's life promises and not just mine. But we'll get there in time. Beyond defining commitments, the other piece is the stuff that I used to spend all of my time on when it came to annual planning, which is defining projects. You might also hear these called rocks, like the big things. To me, this comes down to looking at the A to the Z and figuring out what are the things that need to happen to get us from here to there and chunking those out into projects. My job, though, isn't really to figure out these projects. To a large extent, this planning is done by the leads during the quarterly planning day. But when it was just me, I did this too. Really, though, what I want to just pencil in is what my major priority is. Like, what is the functional area? For example, I want to start doing short form videos. Cool. Or maybe I want to build out a coaching service. Cool. Or maybe I want to launch a new VIP tier of my product. Amazing. Whatever the what is, I want to define that here. From there, I need to define things like budget, like about how big do I think this is going to be very loosely. Like, is it going to be 3 months or 3 days? And then from there, I want to figure out the who. Really the who, if I can get that right, everything else just takes care of itself. For me, I view projects with 3 different types of who's, and this might be helpful to some of you, so I'll just share it here. First up is a coordinator. This is the person that's going to make the project happen. They're the cat herder. Usually this is a lead, but not always. Beyond coordinator, we also have contributors. These are people who are doing things in the project. They've got their sleeves rolled up and they're working on stuff. Contributors at ProcessDriven can vary. They can be anyone in the company or even outsiders. I personally really like to do projects where people from different departments who don't normally talk are working together. The last category is consultant, people who aren't doing anything on the project, but are involved in maybe brainstorming or talking through things, being a sounding board, and so on. My goal personally, as I step more into my CEO role here as the company matures, is to really be a consultant on just a few projects and really let the team lead the charge on the actual execution of most of these. Which is why I say the whole who piece is really everything. Because if I can get that right and get the right person guiding it, who sees the vision, who can make it happen, I mean, my work is done and the magic can really happen by somebody who knows it way better than I do. Now, from there, the very last thing I need to decide is order. Now that I know, these are the major projects I want to do to realize my point Z vision, what needs to come first? This can be a little strategic, so it's one that I like to do with the leadership team because all of them are focused on their projects, and I, as the CEO, need to make sure that it all fits together. So this might be something like, do we do the sales campaign before or after the new membership platform? Or do we start running advertisements before or after we hire the new marketing director? Whatever those pieces are, determining the order, not necessarily the dates, is the final little step here before I can consider the whole year roughly planned. All in all, this whole journey that I just shared with you takes, 2 weeks or so to really go through with a lot of breaks in between and about 2 to 3 full work days really focused on it. But I usually spread it out more if I can. Once I have this down, I usually have a pretty clear vision of what's happening in my company for the next 12 months from the time I've scheduled it. But I'm not naive enough to think this plan is gospel. Instead, this communication and planning piece, the exact pieces I showed right here, I actually have a schedule to revisit this every quarter with the leadership team. So every quarter we meet for half a day and we just go through this again. We say, all right, here's what we were planning. Does this still make sense? If yes, cool. If no, let's refine. And during those quarterly meetings, we really break things down a little bit more, maybe tweak a few pieces, but more or less this annual plan, I would say from the start of the year to the end of the year, is likely around 80 to 90% accurate. The things that throw this off are things like unexpected surprises in the marketplace, maybe personnel changes that derail a project or two, or just projects that run long. That's the most common reason things need to be shaken up. But generally speaking, when we have this plan, we are able to stick to it while still feeling good about what we're doing every single month and feeling flexible enough to adjust it every single quarter. But of course, this whole organizing your annual planning, this is just one process in your business. And if you really want to be systemized, there are so many other processes that might be a thorn in your foot. If this video maybe inspired you a little bit to think about the processes in your business that maybe aren't working so well, that feel stressful or draining, like annual planning used to be for me, maybe this will inspire you to look at how you can systematize those areas. And I know systematize is a buzzword, but it's really just about reflecting and finding the process that works for you and your brain and your organization. While I'm no expert in annual planning, making processes for things is kind of what I do for a living. So if you need any help in this area, if you're inspired to make a change, check out the description below for ways you can work with us here at ProcessDriven to get your business a little bit more systemized. Systemized. Yeah, I hate that word. But of course, while I would love to see you in the program, if it's not a right fit, don't sweat it. I'm so happy that you just spend some of your time with me here today on this video. If you liked this at all, liking and subscribing and commenting and all those things are really appreciated. So YouTube shows you more videos like this, and it just means a lot. But if that's not quite the move for you right now, that's okay. Please just check out this video next and keep going down your learning journey. And until we talk next, enjoy the process.